Today, a huge crowd is on hand at Indianapolis Raceway Park for the 12th annual running of the Budweiser Big Bud Shootout. For the past 12 months, 17 races in all, the NHRA Winston stars of funny car competition have been battling for one thing: enough qualifying points to earn a position in the very elite 8-car field that makes up the Big Bud Shootout, run this weekend at the granddaddy of them all, the U.S. Nationals at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan, and what a gorgeous day for racing. The man standing next to me has been in the finals of this $50,000 payoff 6 out of the last 7 years. John Force, you're a 2-time winner. Can you make it 3?
Well, we're definitely going to try, and I've teamed up with some real good people here, headed by Austin Coyle and Bernie Federley, and they've given me a good race car, and I think we've got a good shot at it.
It's a whole season of work coming down to one race for a lot of money.
It really is. It was a lot at stake, losing the championship, but we're back here trying to get that money back. It takes a lot of money, and we're really excited that Budweiser's coming here with NHRA in Winston and put up this kind of purse, and we're going to give our best shot at it.
Best of luck to you today.
Thank you.
For more on the pairings and the story of this year's Big Bud Shootout, here's Steve Evans.
Well, Dave, as you know, the famous Budweiser Clydesdales are making an appearance here today. So what do you say, in their honor, let's treat this event kind of like a horse race. And I'm the handicapper. Now, no serious horse player is going to bet a bob on the Bud until he checks out the morning workouts held yesterday. Even though the track was fast, that old mutter and defending event champion Al Hoffman stretched his legs to a very nice 5.21 second elapsed time. I put him in the morning line at 8-1. The reigning world champ, Cruz Pedregon, only the second time in the Big Bud, while he improved on Hoffman's time with a 5.18. So I rate him in the morning line at 4-1. John Force, the 2-time Bud champ and runner-up to Hoffman last year, was really on the bit. How about a 5.12? I rate him as 2-1, darn near even money. Normally a good runner, Chuck Etchels was a little off his speed yesterday, only a 5.74, but I think you can throw that work out. I put him at 12-1. You want a medium long shot? Well, the new jockey for Johnny West, Whit Bazemore, 5.29, still 40-1 in my book. Now, you want a genuine long shot at 100-1? How about Gary Bulger? He's wearing blinkers, i.e. no onboard computer, only a 5.63 in the workouts, $2 would get you 200. Now, the two remaining steeds, Gordon Mineo and Tom Hoover, they showed no form whatsoever yesterday, but I'll be generous and let you have them as an entry at 30-1. Now, earlier, I had a chance to take a look at our favorite, John Force, and how he and his team approach round number 1. You hear it all the time on our ESPN drag racing coverage, drivers like even John Force saying, I never pay any attention to who my opponent is. I just run my own race. That's baloney, and everybody knows it, but they stick to the story. What about crew chiefs like Austin Coyle? You sometimes rate the competition and prepare the car accordingly? You got Whit Bazemore round 1 here.
Well, sure, Steve. We got to take a look at that. You know, our biggest chances of losing this year is when we try a little too hard and smoke the tires. So if we've got a little bit easier round coming up, why, you know, we're going to be a little more cautious and be sure we get down the racetrack.
What if you had Cruz Pedregon on the other lane?
Well, then we'd have to be a little less cautious because, you know, the margin for victory there is usually pretty slim.
Steve, our 8 jockeys have been qualifying for 17 events. That's a full 12 months. And the number 1 qualifier at those races would receive 175 points. The number 16 qualifier would get 85. The rest, something in the middle. Whit Bazemore qualified 8. He will definitely have to beat the odds as he tangles with the number 1 car, John Force. Number 2 qualifier was Cruz Pedregon. Gordon Mineo definitely has a challenge from his number 7 spot. The number 6 qualifier, Gary Bulger, tangles with number 3, Chuck Etchels. And our final pair of round 1 finds the defending champ Al Hoffman squaring off against Tom Hoover. Back in Indianapolis Raceway Park, it's time for round number 1 of the 12th annual running of the Budweiser Big Bud Shootout. Here is the number 5 qualifier, Tom Hoover, at the wheel of the Pioneer Electronics Dodge Daytona. He is up against the defending champion, the Blower Drive Services Dodge of Al Hoffman. And this is what you could call, as Yogi Berra once did, deja vu all over again, because Hoffman raced Tom Hoover in round number 1 a year ago. His victory over Hoover there set him on the track for the $50,000 payoff back in 1992. The burnout's completed, the engines cackling away on the starting line, some 5,000 horsepower per car. And as they say, paybacks are tough. Tom Hoover just did it to Al Hoffman, and he did it on driving skills because Hoffman had a quicker elapsed time of 5:26 compared to the winning time of 5:27 at 2:82 for Tom Hoover. Watch off the starting line. 0.03 of a second advantage went to Hoover. He was able to use that all the way down the racetrack to maintain the lead, even though Hoffman was closing fast. And at the finish line, the margin of victory, 14 thousandths of a second. Steve?
Boy, Hoover, that was a heck of a car race, and you won it on a hole shot.
How about that for somebody 50 years old, huh?
And your morning workout yesterday meant nothing, a 5:27.
No, I was worried. We were a little slow yesterday, and we knew we had to step it up today, and it was a great race.
Steve, your 30-to-1 odds on Tom Hoover looking pretty good. Here is Chuck Etchells at the wheel of his Kendall GT1 Super Winch Dodge Daytona. His opponent here in round number 1 of the Big Bud Shootout is the Tyrant car owned by Dale Creasy and driven by Gary Bulger, another long shot. As he does his burnout, let's go back to Steve.
Al, the car looked to be a real handful.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on out there. I mean, for some reason, it seemed like I was getting my own oil or something, but parts are flying out of the thing, pulleys are coming off, and I got a long talk with whoever's putting my pulleys on here. We had a problem, and I'm not real pleased with it.
The concern of Al Hoffman showing not only in his voice, but his demeanor as well. You're looking over the shoulder of Chuck Etchells. He's watching the traffic cop, his crew chief Tim Richards, out in front, backing him up into the exact spot he wants him on the starting line. Etchells qualified number 3 with a total of 2,510 points. Bulger, the long shot in this race, had qualified number 6 at a total of 1,770 points. This long-time team out of the Midwestern part of the country is somewhat handicapped. As Steve told us earlier, they do not use an onboard computer, a recording device that keeps track of what happens in this race car during the run. Therefore, they have to revert back to the old seat-of-the-pants knowledge, and Dale Creasy and Gary Bulger are truly experts at it. This car is run as quick as the low 5 teens. But not to be today. A 5:25 winning time for Chuck Etchells, trailing with a 5:39 was Gary Bulger. You are looking at Vice Gordon Mineo. His sleek Pontiac Firebird formula-bodied creation comes to the starting line to race against one of the toughest cars in the world today, the McDonald's Oldsmobile driven by Cruz Pedregon. For Gordon Mineo, it has been quite a 12-month period. 3 cars lost to disastrous fires, but it all comes out in the end as Gordon Mineo, this his proudest moment, making his first ever Big Bud Shootout field. For Cruz Pedregon, he is just now beginning to regain the performance that carried him to his Winston title a year ago. Gordon's wife, Ann, directing him back into the tracks that he left after his long, smoky burnout. His son, Jason Mineo, underneath the car, making a final check of the engine. You look inside the roll cage, that's Gordon sitting in there. Jason says, wait a minute, I need to tighten up a fitting, and he jumps in there to make sure there's no liquid leaking out of the engine. Gordon had qualified in the number 6 spot at 1,690 points. His opponent, Pedregon, qualified second at 2,605. So another of Steve's long shots. Gordon Mineo lined up in the far lane. The choice of lanes went to Pedregon by virtue of his higher qualifying position, the total number of points making the difference. And it was with justification that Cruz Pedregon qualified higher, 5:25 at 279 miles an hour. Bear in mind, we're seeing a lot of those mid-520s coming out of our racers today as Gordon Mineo trailed with a 5:35. In replay, it takes a good eye to see the advantage gained at the starting line, but in reality, it went to Gordon Mineo by 1/100 of a second. but with a performance that Pedregon had a full 1/10 of a second better than that of Gordon. You can see what it measures out to at the finish line when the margin is 89 thousandths of a second.
Well, Cruz, I think a 525 is about what crew chief Mike Green wanted out of this car.
Yeah, you know, lane choice is really not a big deal because the lanes are equal, but, you know, we're just taking one round at a time here in this Bud Shootout with this McDonald's car.
You're going to race Chuck Etchells. He also ran a 525. He'll have lane choice.
That's okay. You know, I want Etchells. You know, he got us there at Brainerd, so, you know, we want him.
That defeat at the hands of Chuck Etchells came in the finals 2 weeks ago at Brainerd, still fresh in Pedregon's mind. And look at the emotion out of Pedregon. Well, that's what $50,000 to the victor will do for you here in the Big Bud Shootout. Here's a man that's got quite a challenge on his hands. Whit Bazemore driving Johnny West, Dodge Daytona, the fast orange car. And Whit has drawn the dubious distinction of having to race the best car in the world today. The Castrol Oldsmobile driven by John Force. And what a view you have, identical to what John sees out of this race car. That's Austin Coyle out to the windshield, backing John into his own track. Force qualified in the #1 spot, amassing a total of 2,755 points. And Bazemore made it at the final race 2 weeks ago at Brainerd. He made it with 1,570 points to qualify in the #8 spot. Well, we'll see here in round #1 of the Big Bud Shootout whether Austin Coyle has backed off the performance of Force and the Castrol Oldsmobile, as Bazemore is going to have to rise to the occasion big time. Overpowering the racetrack is Bazemore, and overpowering Austin Coyle is John Force. Look at this, 5:14 at 290 miles an hour, only 2/100ths of a second short of his warm-up times yesterday. Force definitely the class here in round #1 as he goes into the second round against the upset-minded Tom Hoover. That 5:14 by Force definitely gives him the lane choice. The other side of the ladder closely matched, a pair of 525s by just a few thousandths. Chuck Etchells gets to pick his lane.
Well, those 525s were looking pretty good until the Force man came along, a 514 at 290.
My boys are lying to me, and it's aggravating the heck out of me. They told me she was soft. She'd run 18 or something. I knew when she left. She hiked the front end up. She was hunting down through there just straight, trucking. Good opponent, fun race.
And 50 grand 2 rounds away.
Every time I think about 50 grand, I lose it in the fire somewhere, so I ain't thinking about it.
It's time for the semifinals of the Budweiser Big Bud Shootout for our funny car competitors, and Chuck Etchells takes on Cruz Pedregon in a rematch of the final round at Brainerd, Minnesota, and that Champion Auto Stores Nationals just 2 weeks ago, where Etchells pulled off the upset and put away the Cruiser. The McDonald's Oldsmobile here losing lane choice by a mere 1/1000th of a second to the Kendall GT1 car driven by Etchells. Very close in performance in round #1. Both drivers recording identical 525s, and if they maintain that same kind of performance here in the semifinals, it could be driving ability that will decide this race. The aerodynamic touches to these cars, you see just a few of them as our camera roams over the Dodge Daytona body. The wheel wells fared in, the spoilers in the back, all designed to cut through the air as cleanly as possible and to plant this car the wedge shape, providing the downforce that hopefully will keep those rear tires from breaking loose. Chuck Etchells and Cruz Pedregon now beginning to concentrate on getting a good launch off the starting line. Reacting to the green light. To their advantage, that's the goal. And Cruz Pedregon might say, in your face, Chuck Etchells, I got you off the starting line and I got you big at the finish line. 5:18, the winning time, 290 miles an hour. Pedregon into the finals for the $50,000 payoff. Tom Hoover, his Pioneer Electronics Dodge, upset-minded this day. His competition is the Castrol Oldsmobile of John Force. It was a round ago that Hoover took out the defending champion Al Hoffman. Steve?
Well, Cruz Pedregon runs about 4 furlongs in 5:18, upping the ante a bit.
Yeah, we need it. I'm sure we're going to race Force. Etchells was tough. You know, he beat us in Brainerd, and I don't know what the reaction times were, but, you know, we wanted him.
And you said the lanes were equal. You just proved it.
Yeah, that's right. You know, that's what's nice about Indy here. NHRA does a marvelous job preparing the track. That's why we love running. It's the biggest.
He's pumped.
Pumped hardly the word for it, Steve, as Cruz Pedregon already counting John Force as his opponent, but Tom Hoover might have something to say about that. The lane choice here going to Force by nearly 13 hundredths of a second. He got the quicker elapsed time in round number 1, a 5:14 to Hoover's 5:27. The final check under the body. This is a standard procedure on the Force-driven Oldsmobile. Austin Coyle, the crew chief, along with Bernie Federley, Larry Frazier, and a whole host of workers on the Force machine. Contrast that, if you will, with the Tom Hoover race car, which is still basically a family operation. His dad, George, in his mid-80s, along with the rest of the crew, trying to rise to the occasion here to put out the best funny car in the world today. Hoover with a valiant try, but it did not pay off. 5:15, the winning time for Force at 290 miles an hour. Tom Hoover did his job. He got the advantage at the starting line, but the performance just not there. Let's watch in replay. Nearly 2 hundredths of a second advantage going to Hoover in the far lane, but Force had eaten that up very quickly as his car accelerated hard in the first few hundred feet. You see a few flashes of flame that came out of the engine on Tom Hoover's car. That indicated problems there. But for Force, with the exception of it drifting a bit to the left, it was a picture-perfect run that crossed the quarter-mile finish line at a 5:15. And that earned him lane choice over Cruz Pedregon by only 3 hundredths of a second, setting up a classic battle for the Big Bud Shootout $50,000 paycheck. Steve?
John, the Big Bud Finals got war written all over it.
It really does, and I was really even happy to see Cruz run that 18, and Cole got back in the box and stepped her up a shade, because I said, we're going to win it. Let's just prove we can beat him right here at Indy and not just struggle through it here with a faster race car. But
Made a nasty little move to the left.
yeah, it did. It was a little hairy. I mean, she smoked the tires and got over on the wall, but this old heap dries herself. She just come right back in the middle of the truck. I'm going to give Cruz a great race today.
This huge crowd at Indianapolis Raceway Park has been waiting for one thing, the showdown for the cash in the Big Bud Shootout. It is John Force and Cruz Pedregon going for the honors. And on paper, you got to favor John Force. What a history he has in this event. In the 12 years of the Big Bud Shootout, John Force has been in the championship round 8 times. As Cruz backs up to the starting line area, earlier Steve had a chance to talk to this man, Pedregon's crew chief Mike Green, about how he motivates his steed.
With that 5:25 in round number 1 and even the 5:18 in round number 2, there's still a good chance crew chief Mike Green has been keeping a fairly tight rein on the McDonald's car. But I have a feeling now that philosophy will change and you will go to the whip against Ford.
Yeah, Steve, he's been running, his ETs have been quicker than us all day, and even yesterday he ran a really nice 5:12, so we know he's got a baseline run to run at least a 5:12. So we're going to try to tune our car up to run a little bit quicker than that if possible.
You'd like a little help from Cruz in the starting line.
Yeah, Cruz has been driving great this weekend. We're really excited about that, and he's pumped up for this, and we're going to go for that $50,000 Budweiser money.
Well, there is definitely a carrot at the end of the stick. That 50 grand makes a big difference in the motivation factor. Austin Coyle, stoic as ever. Very little emotion ever shows on the face of Austin Coyle. And the same can be said for Mike Green. If you haven't figured it out by now, there's just as big a battle going on between the crew chiefs as there is the drivers. Tremendous race, and it is John Force winning by a matter of inches. The elapsed time winning at a 5:17, 285 miles an hour. Pedregon fell off pace just a little bit, but almost made up for it with what you saw just then in our replay. That was a hole shot, a giant advantage off the starting line. 0.04 of a second, the difference at the start, but it was just a few inches. 0.03 of a second. That was the margin of John's win. Steve?
Well, Dave, here is John Forrest, $50,000. Richard, did you know you'd won?
I really didn't know, Steve. I mean, it was right out the window. I drove her till her neck hung out. The old hound dog, she just leaned over. There was 50 grand. Get to ride the Clydesdales. Don't care if she threw all the rods and caught on fire. It was just exciting. I heard he did a great job on the starting line, but he's a great world champ, and I'm proud of him. I love him and all these guys, and especially all our people. Thank you.
John Forrest showing them how it's done.